Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. This week's video was supposed to be about Cash's vet history. However, I'm finding that video really difficult to film. As you can imagine, there's a lot of emotion behind the past 3 years and everything that we've been through, and I'm finding it really difficult to start it. So instead, this week's video is all about kissing spine. Now, I'm going to preface this with the fact that I am not a vet at all. I'm an owner that has been through an extensive amount of issues and very aware that I'm my horse's only voice. So because we are the people that see our horses the most, we know them the best, nobody actually does know your horse better than you do. So when you see the vet, we provide them with as much information as we can, and they need to decide what's going on based on symptoms that we tell them. So if we miss something, the vet can only make their best guess, and it's just on the information that you have given them. So that's why there's a lot to be said about doing your own research and trusting your gut, because you do know them the best. You might not have all of the knowledge to help them, but you do know them the best. So with that in mind, I did a lot of research when it came to Cash's kissing spine. I'm not trying to diagnose your horses or anything like that, but I'm going to share that research with you. And I just want to provide information, and hopefully it will help somebody along the way. So let's get to it. What is kissing spine? Right, here is a diagram of the horse's back. You can see it's separated into 5 different sections. So there are lots of what we call spinous processes along that. They are connected by strong ligaments, and they're moved by the surrounding muscles on either side of the back and underneath. The back itself is comprised of 18 thoracic and 6 lumbar vertebrae. So those bits in the middle are considered the actual back. In a normal horse, they've got the spine, and then they've got upper bony projections. So you've got your spine, and then the processes raise up from those, known as the dorsal spinal processes, because the dorsal means back. They're evenly spaced to allow for flexion and extension of your back. So that's where you can get your extended or your collected work. A horse diagnosed with kissing spine will have 2 or more of these spinous processes that come up from the spine starting to touch. They might even overlap and have bone on bone grinding. Now, obviously that sounds really painful. It's the lack of space between the vertebrae that causes them to have decreased mobility and experience the pain at different severities. As you can see here, I got this source from Etalon. You can compare here what a kissing spine horse would look like if you did x-rays on them, and what a normal horse that doesn't have kissing spine would look like. The causes of kissing spine, there's a few that you can't change and a few that you can. So there's some predisposed breeds. So lots of research has shown that warm bloods, thoroughbreds, quarter horses are more likely to have kissing spine than the other breeds. Whether it's a genetic thing or whether it's that these breeds tend to be ridden at younger ages, you know, we know that a horse's spine doesn't mature until it's 7 years old. You know, my horse was in racing and was racing 2 weeks after its 2nd birthday. So you can imagine that it was in training and backed way before then. So that's likely to have been the start of Cash's kissing spine. There also might be a genetic component. Some research has shown links to chromosomes. So, you know, if you were breeding a horse, one day you might actually be able to look into whether the sire or the mare has breeding lines that might indicate kissing spine in later life. Conformation is another one. So horses with shorter than average backs tend to develop kissing spine. It's to do with the fact that they have the same number of vertebrae but in a smaller space. They've got a short back, but they've still got as many vertebrae as a long-backed horse has. So making it more likely that these spinous processes start to touch together because they're squashed in. But that doesn't mean that a long-backed horse is safe. Interestingly, I've read some research on a horse's ability to carry weight, and it suggests that horses that have a longer back can't carry as much weight. So if you've got a long back horse, it's worth considering making sure that they don't carry too much weight, or perhaps they could be at risk of kissing spine too. I've got some research on rider weight in my Instagram highlights for anybody that is interested. And lastly, the one that you can change, so improper conditioning. So horses that are ridden with a high head carriage or a hollow back or trained under saddle way too young are more likely to develop kissing spine. So if a horse's top line and back are weak and unable to carry a rider properly, the dorsal spinous processes, the ones coming up out of their spine, they're not able to lift and spread. So instead they will come down, and as your horse hollows, they will start to touch. The awkward thing is, if you've already got a horse that's already got kissing spine, they're more likely to put themselves in a hollow position to kind of brace themselves. So they'll struggle to work over their back, and they'll usually need some form of pain relief in order to do so. And that's why we look into treatment options, because if they've got kissing spine, they're going to find the rehab hard, because the rehab involves them stretching over their back. And I will do a separate video on rehab exercises and information on that. But that's why we need to look into treatment options. Another thing that you can change is the angle of the feet. So I started looking into this a lot. It's part of the reason that Cash is barefoot now. The negative plantar angle of the hind feet in particular can have an impact on whether kissing spine occurs. So here's an infographic that might explain this a little bit further for you. So you can have a look at the hooves at the bottom, work out where you think your horse lands, but learning about angles for the hooves is really important, even if you're not concerned about kissing spine, but I assume you are because you're watching this video. So you now know what kissing spine is, you know what things can cause it, but do you know if your horse has it? So here's a list of typical symptoms. I'm not going to read them all out because there's so many, but one of the things to know is that obviously these symptoms can overlap with symptoms of other conditions. So for example, EPM, wobblers, ulcers, Lyme disease, West Nile virus, ovarian cysts, all of those have some of these symptoms, not all of them. And you don't have to have all of these symptoms to have kissing spine. Cash didn't have hardly any of these, and he had kissing spine in quite a few places. When it comes to Cash's symptoms, he didn't have a lot. He reverted back to being a llama when I asked him to canter in a circle, when previously he'd managed it really comfortably. He was working down and stretching long and low. Initially I'd treated for ulcers in the February and gave him a month off, thinking that he'd been struggling with the sand land that he'd been on, because we move yards. But when I got back on, he did the same thing. I even swapped saddles thinking it might be that, but the same thing happened. And I wish I'd have trusted my gut sooner, because I felt it was his back. And so many people have been riding a lot longer than me. You know, I'd had a long time off of horses. So I kind of trusted him when they said he's an ex-racehorse, it's a training issue, because he wasn't throwing me off, he wasn't protesting loudly. They dismissed that it would be pain, but thankfully I didn't listen to them for too long, and it only took me 6 weeks between the first symptoms and getting x-rays done to find the kissing spine. I would have found it sooner if I hadn't have thought it was ulcers. Knowing what I know now, ulcers are usually secondary anyway, so I shouldn't have tried to treat the ulcers without finding what caused the ulcers. So here's a video of Cash having his x-rays done for anyone that is interested. Just a reminder here of what a normal back looks like and what a kissing spine back looks like. And here is a copy of Cash's x-rays. So you can sort of see here, they're not massively bad. Up at the front end where the withers are, they're not bad at all. But when the saddle comes into play, so in the thoracic region, and then maybe the first couple of vertebrae that are in the hind end, in the lumbar section, that's where we're kind of looking. So it's really important to remember that the severity of the x-rays don't link to the severity of pain. So you could have a horse that's got overlapping processes that experiences less pain than Cash might do here. So that's just something for you to bear in mind, for those of you that have had horrific x-rays come back and you are sat there thinking, oh my gosh, my poor horse, why didn't I listen to him, or anything like that, you will have been listening to him. Remember, you are the person that knows them best, and horrific x-rays don't necessarily mean horrific pain. What's important to notice here in Cash's is in this thoracic one in the middle, there are areas that are more white than grey. So you'll see on the edges of some of the processes, they've started to go white. That is ossification. That's where there's calcification or hardening of it, and that is part of why we did the treatment option that we did, which I will go into in a second. So I'll come back to this. When it comes to treatment, it's important to know that no matter which treatment you pick, the aim of all of them is to break the pain cycle. A horse cannot learn to work over its back and its core if pain is still there. So that's got to be addressed first. Therefore, you can see it's not the treatment that's going to fix your horse, it's rather the rehab. The treatment just cuts the pain. The rehab is what allows them to get a stronger back, support those spinous processes that are impinging on each other. So we need to open the back up. So it gives us a window of opportunity where they're not in pain to build some top line, build some support. And without the proper rehab, kissing spine will likely reoccur. So some treatment options are steroid injections. You can have them done locally into the back muscles. Your horse will usually be sedated, needle inserted, and the injections go in between those spinous processes. They're anti-inflammatory, it reduces pain and stiffness between the joints and allows you to rehab them. If they're too close together, if the spinous process is too close together or fused together, then it's not going to make much difference to them. So the severity of x-rays, whilst not indicating pain, do have an impact on which treatment option you should choose. So if you're starting to see them really close together or fused, then steroid injections aren't going to do a whole lot. And it's important to remember that these steroid injections are temporary. So you are hoping that you have done enough rehab to strengthen everything, and you may need to have the steroid injections again. You might have reoccurring pain. Other treatments are muscle relaxants like Rebaxin. They can ease the tension in the horse's back, again to let you get them to work over their back properly. Shockwave, that's where you use sound waves, where energies pass through the skin to the injured part of the body using a special device. They work by increasing blood flow. The idea is that the blood goes to that area and stimulates healing. Mesotherapy is an injectable anti-inflammatory. Again, it goes into the mesoderm, so the deeper layers of the skin with small needles. The point is to break the pain cycle. There is some research that shows that mesotherapy combined with shockwave results in positive results for 86% of horses. So if you're considering these slightly less severe options for treatment, might want to think about combining a couple. Some more conservative treatments are conditioning exercises, so the rehab you will be doing, anti-inflammatory stuff like Equiox, other pain medications, corrective farriery, because remember those angles are part of it, chiropractic care, acupuncture. Cash had acupuncture before we decided to go ahead with surgery. Things like diets to support it, making sure that you are not feeding an inflammatory diet that mostly revolves around starch and sugar, to be honest. You can think about supplements, although I would say supplements would not do a whole lot. They would support, they wouldn't fix. Get your saddle checked as well. It is really important to remember that they'll work in very mild cases, these kinds of non-invasive approaches, the type that have got minimal arthritic changes in the spinal processes. So remember the white bits that I showed you on my x-rays of Cash, that's arthritic changes. So if you had less arthritic changes than that, you might be able to go for this. Maybe you had kissing spine just starting, then some more non-invasive approaches might be the way to go first. Any treatment plan that you choose must include conditioning exercises to strengthen the horse's top line and abdominal muscles. If they've got a weak top line, the spine will collapse on itself and it'll just bring those spinous processes closer together. So this is the one that Cash had in the end. This is ligament snip surgery, or interspinous ligament desmotomy as it's called, ISLD. And it involves cutting the ligament that runs between the spinous processes at each affected site. So Cash had 8 done in the end. And if you remember me telling you about those white pieces of ossification, what happened was the ligaments of in between his spinous processes had calcified, which means that they had hardened, which means that they weren't really doing what ligaments were supposed to do. Remember, we were wanting to do rehab that aims to stretch over his back, and his ligaments had kind of started to fuse. They'd started to harden, and they were going to make it difficult for him to be able to do that. This kind of procedure is done with local anaesthetic. The horse is stood up, they're sedated, and the ligaments are snipped. It comes with minimal complications, high long-term success rates, 90%, but it does have some limitations. So I found a study that looked at outcomes that were 3 years post-ligament snip, and out of 71 horses, 56 of them were back in work. Only 27 of the 56 that got back into work managed the same performance as before or better. So that didn't sound too great for me. So not that many were able to get back into the same amount of performance. However, I wonder if they hadn't have had it done, would they have been completely retired? And some of the horses that didn't perform well after they had the ligament snip had other issues like lameness going on, which could account for why they didn't get back to the same performance. And I'll get into this in a little bit, but there's not really a surprise to me there, because kissing spine has been linked to issues in the hind end. So lameness going on wouldn't surprise me, because sometimes that's what came first. There's another study that's much better in helping you make a decision. This is the one that kind of helped me, well, this and the next one. So it's looked specifically at racehorses, 159 racehorses, comparing surgery versus rehab. Both groups were back in work in 4 weeks, so one lot had the surgery, one didn't, and it shows that they all trained with the same trainer, but it doesn't say what the training was. And we know that the rehab is more important than the treatment, so it would have been nice to know what the rehab was, but the study unfortunately doesn't say. But the outcome of it did show that it suggests that having the surgery was better than not having the surgery. Another research study compared steroid injections to ligament snips. The participant range is actually quite equal. So 38 horses were injected in 7 spaces with steroids. 37 horses had 8 ligaments snipped, so quite even. And it showed that 34 of the 38 that were injected had resolved back pain. 35 of the 37 surgeries resolved back pain. So again, pretty even, pretty same. So in terms of reducing back pain, same. Do it, both of them work. All had the same rehab, but that's what makes this study really good. But 19 of the injected horses, the ones that had steroids, had reoccurring back pain long term. And those that had the lig snip were 24 times more likely to experience long-term solution of signs of back pain. So 24 times more likely to be out of pain in the long term. And that's the one that I found particularly reassuring, because it had similar participants, same rehab protocols, and then it was looking at long-term information of back pain. So that kind of helped me make some decisions. Information shows that horses who were greater than 5 lesions or extremely close processes aren't really good candidates for ISLD. Cash had 8 done, but he didn't have 8 spinous processes touching. He truly had only 3. 8 ligaments were cut because the ligament itself had started to calcify, but the bones weren't touching on all of them. just like any of these treatments, this surgery does not cure kissing spine, but it does minimise the symptoms and allow the back to move comfortably during rehab. So even if they have surgery, kissing spine can come back if you don't do the correct rehab and don't continue to do it. So you should always keep putting these rehab exercises into your routine. And as I said, I will be going through that next week on next week's video. So as I said, what we chose to do for cash. So we started with injections initially, shockwave and acupuncture. And in hindsight, I do think the vet was probably using up a bit of my money here because I had insurance then. So what I know now, I probably wouldn't have done all 3 of these. For those of you interested, the back x-rays were £420. So that's without the £50 visit fee or the £40 charge for the exam. Shockwave was 300 quid, not including the visit fee, and acupuncture was 60 quid, not including visit fee. But then cash fell into a neck problem, which is a whole other story. As I said, I haven't quite brought myself to discuss his vet history in full yet. But we went down a long road of further x-rays, which resulted in him having back surgery. He had bone scan and x-rays as well. And then he had his ligament snipped from T12 to L1. So 8 in total. Would I do it again? It is hard to say because he seemed to act a lot happier even 4 days post-op. I remember trying to walk him down to the field. I didn't put him on complete box rest because he weaves, and you can imagine that a weaving horse, that cannot be good for his back. So instead he had like a pen in the field, a small area of the field. He just grazed anyway, so it was probably the best decision for him. But I remember walking him down and him almost jig-jogging next to me, and before I had to drag him down to the field. He really struggled a lot. If I hadn't had insurance, I think maybe I would have gone down the injections and rehab route first to see what happened. But the problem with insurance is you only get 12 months on that claim. So I could have done the more conservative route, and then he needs surgery anyway in the long term, which at that point it wouldn't be covered by the insurance. And for anyone interested, the surgery was over £2,000. I'll put the actual amount here when I need to go back and look for it. And like I said before, the job of the ligaments is to hold the vertebrae together, stabilise the spine and protect the discs. But because of that ossification, because they had started hardening, they weren't doing what they were supposed to do anymore. So they were adding to that pain and causing him to hollow his back because they'd hardened. Calcification is a process where calcium builds up in body tissue and it makes it hard. He probably would have got better with rehab, but not all the way better. He would have always had reoccurring back pain that I would have had to manage, and I still have to manage that now. I do so with various things, such as rehab exercises. He has physio, etc. But the likelihood would have been more present. That back pain may have reoccurred more often, and I would have needed to keep having those steroid injections ongoing, which in the long term would have been more expensive. And whilst it's not all about money, it is mostly, well, it is all about what's best for cash. I do have to be realistic with my budget and ability to take care of him and what we can do for him as well. The other surgery you may have heard people talk about is called bone shave or a wedge ostectomy. It involves reshaping or removing part of the affected spinous processes, and it's really invasive. So you need to put your horse under general anaesthetic for it because you're literally taking bone away. It requires a much longer recovery time too. They'll cut through the ligament and they will use a bone saw. The surgeon will remove small sections of the spine and then they'll reattach the ligament if it's not calcified, obviously. So because some of them will have had calcified ligaments, you might find that some surgeons do a mixture of both the lig snip and the wedge ostectomy at the same time. So they'll have their bone shaved and they'll have their ligament snipped. The good thing with this is obviously the kissing spine is immediately gone because they've shaved through the bits that were touching and removed them. But it is a lot more invasive. I did find some information that showed that there were better outcomes with that surgery. But due to its invasive nature, the surgeon that Cash had said that he didn't want to perform it. He wanted to go with just the leg snip. Things I've learned along the way are that horses haven't fully evolved to carry us, and they're not actually built to sustain a rider. So instead of thinking of kissing spine as a category of they have it or they don't, I would start thinking of it as a sliding scale of how much kissing spine does my horse have, because I think if we x-rayed lots of horses, we would find that lots more of them fit onto the spectrum than we think. So obviously a mild case, a moderate case, a severe case, they're not built to carry us. There's a good chance that, you know, lots of the horses out there have kissing spine, they're just not showing pain symptoms right now. So for this reason, all horses, even those without kissing spine, should be performing core strengthening exercises to help them carry the weight of us. So that's where next week's video will come in handy for everyone. Something else to know is that kissing spine is usually secondary, so make sure you find what's causing the incorrect posture and preventing them from using their core. Even if it's just weakness, it could just be that they're weak and they need to do some strengthening, but it is important to know that horses with kissing spine often have hock or sacroiliac arthritis. And when horses move incorrectly in their back, they will often move incorrectly in their hind as well. So conversely, back pain can also cause hock and sacroiliac pain because it makes them move differently. So considering it's usually secondary, most find that kissing spine usually goes hand in hand with a hind end problem. So that's why I had 2 hospitals do lameness workups. I had my initial vet do one, and I had the first place that had him for the actual surgery do one, and I had somewhere else when we were looking into the neck problem that he had. Sadly, they still missed his hock arthritis, and as I say, I'm on year 3 of vet bills now, and finally had a vet that identified it. So up until now, I had been thinking I have had everything checked on this horse by multiple people, and it was still missed, sadly. And you know, I'm not a vet, like, you know, you trust them, don't you? But at least they are done now. This is why 2 years later my horse doesn't palpate sore on his back, but we've been dealing with intermittent lameness, which I can now attribute to his hock arthritis. We need to make sure that we make our horse strong before they're expected to carry us. Incorrect posture can lead to weakness in their top line, which can make more sinister problems along the line. I see so many people bringing horses back into work without any groundwork, and it makes me wince. Allowing them to get strong on their own is really important. They cannot go from chilling field with no muscle development to suddenly being expected to move their own body and carry us at the same time. This is also why, despite a lot of surgeons recommending people get back on their horses after 8 weeks post-surgery, I'd remind you that the surgeons are experts in diagnosis and treatment, but they are not experts in rehab. I tried to get back on Cash in the August, which is 4.5 months after surgery, and he definitely wasn't strong enough, despite me rehabbing diligently. He actually wasn't ready until the November, which was 7 months after surgery. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Join me next week for some kissing spine exercises and the rehab program that I used. I will happily share it with you because it may just help somebody else. I will remind you though, I'm not a vet, nor am I a physio, so please use at your own discretion and responsibility. But you will be able to download your own template of this rehab program for your own horse if you wish. So remember, the exercises are things that every horse will benefit from. So even if you don't have a horse with kissing spine, I hope that you are inspired to use some of them. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next week.